Hi, Zesties. Okay, well, I am eating Whataburger again. So, and it's day 3 in Mississippi. And I'm gonna do a story time of red flags in housing situations. See if you guys can learn from me, learn from my mistakes. But anyway, there's so many fast food. Whataburger just does not play. Look at this big thing. Look at this big thing. Woo. The freaking bug. There's been a bug in my car. I don't know if it's a roach or what. I feel like it is. But I can't every time I feel it, I swat it and then I can't find it. I know that sounds really crazy, but it's true, guys. Okay, so anyway, let me just say, there's a million fast food places here that I haven't been. But I just had to go to Whataburger. And look at this. This is their medium. Okay, so let's talk about, what to avoid in housing situations. Because obviously, I just had a whole housing situation that I didn't really like. Obviously, considering I packed up and drove to Mississippi, clearly I wasn't happy. So, ooh, baby, I can just tell. Ooh. I can just tell. So, number 1, don't ignore red flags just because you're moving in with family or friends. This is a mistake I've made twice. Maybe you'll hear this other story one day. Gosh, that's a frickin' story. Hey, that's part of how I ended up having a midlife crisis and talking to you guys. But so, this situation was with friends, and friends of many years. Which, to be honest, I really wish that this would have worked out. It's just, I didn't like the way things were going. So, anyway. By the way, this is the jalapeno burger. I forget the exact name. If it's jalapeno cheddar or something like that. But okay, one of the first red flags for me was that I wasn't getting a clear rent amount. I was getting various figures of what the rent would be until I had to finally that freaking bug there. Until I finally was tell me the total amount of rent. What's the total amount of rent for this place? Love that spicy ranch too. So long story short, the rent is $4,000 in total, and we were going to be paying $1,400, and then what we were gonna end up renting later, or when we ended up renting the 4th room out to someone else later, the rent would be about $1,000 each. However, originally we were going to rent the suite out and pay like very little rent, but the like narcissist landlord or whatever took the suite and didn't pay for it, so, or pay the correct share or whatever. But another thing is, like, if you have a permanent situation, don't go to an impermanent situation, because this whole thing was like gonna happen. This whole thing was like we were gonna live in this house while my friend was getting his house remodeled. And I'm like, duh, you should have stayed in your $1,000 studio in St. Pete. Hello, I could have permanently stayed in St. Pete. Everything happens for a reason. Oh, excuse me. But, like, you know, that was kind of red flaggy, because it's like, okay, well, how long will it take? You know, what if it takes a month and then you say, oh, you know, my house is done, bye, or whatever. But, you know, supposedly this is going to take like a year or two and whatever. And I just really wanted, I really wanted to live right by the beach, and I just thought that it would be good and it would work out. But anyway, the next issue is what I found through my research online. I guess maybe I'm lucky. I feel like this was my first narcissist, because I was abused as a child, but I don't think anyone involved was a narcissist, because the behavior is very, like, specific, and this is the first time I've encountered this behavior for sure. But, like, there's this thing called future faking. So in the landlord sense, this would be like, although your living situation is not the price you wanted, or like although your living situation is not like the price you wanted, or is not what you were expecting, or whatever, something's going to happen in the future that's going to change that, and you're going to be really happy, and you're going to be living in the best situation. Like, that's how this whole 4th room thing was for me, which was like, oh, I'm paying $1,400, and I didn't initially want to pay that much. However, once we rent the suite out, we're going to be paying like $800. Oh, oops. Landlord took the suite and also isn't paying his fair share for it. Oh, but no worries. You know, when we rent this 4th room out, it'll be $1,000 or so. And like, that would have been fine for me. You know, if they just charged me straight 1/4 of the rent for 1 out of 4 rooms. Okay. You know. I'd even look past the whole suite thing. But like, then the landlord guy, who's not even the landlord, he's a friend of the landlord, was like, oh no, that room's mine. It's my guest room, but also not paying for it. And also that he did that in punishment for me saying I would leave if we couldn't find a roommate. But I was frustrated because they forced me to find the roommate and then made it difficult to... They were putting too many like restrictions on who the roommate could be and whatever. So anyway. And then when I left, they were saying, oh, maybe we'll rent the 4th room out or this and that. And I was just thinking, oh, well, I've heard this before. You know, you had like multiple chances with this, and you know, I just kind of smelled the BS, you know what I mean? I was like, look, I'm sorry, this is too much for me. Another red flag for me, I feel like this should be obvious, but if you receive like a punishment from a landlord, I think that's an immediate like, okay, something's up here. Because, you know, when this landlord guy said he was taking the 4th bedroom for himself and later refused to pay for it, and threatened that maybe in 2 weeks we'd have to leave and all this stuff. That's the next one. If they ever do any type of threat of you have to leave, it's done. That was for me, that day that happened, that was the day I started saying, please comment so I can stay in Florida. Help me stay in Florida, because I had already kind of decided, I might be leaving Florida. So, ooh, the spice is getting to me. They put a lot of jalapenos on here. But like, it's the fact that he said all that stuff. And he said that that was due to the fact that I had said I would leave if we couldn't find a roommate. And I was doing that to light a fire under their you-know-whats, to say, hey, look, you guys put this entire thing on me. You guys run an ad. You guys help too. You know what I mean? That was a huge red flag to me. Like, okay, I think that this is like not healthy, you know, because I had never had anyone besides like a parent like punish me. But that's what was happening. He was punishing me. Even the day that I left, they were bringing that up, that I had said I would leave, and that this was like months ago. Which is weird to me, because I would have stayed had they just followed through with renting out that 4th room, me paying $1,050 or like $1,040 or something like that. But anyway, let's see, what are the other things to avoid? Oh yeah, another one is something else I noticed, and I learned this when looking up narcissist. I don't know why I looked it up, but his behavior was so weird to me and different than I had ever experienced. And I also was really curious how my friend was like brainwashed by him, it seems. Like my friend thought all this was fine, and I was like, hello, like, do you have eyes and ears and sense? Or like, what is going on here, you know? So I had heard the term narcissist thrown around, so I looked it up, like narcissist landlord, and I was like, oh, he's a narcissist landlord. So another thing they do is tell you really vague and conflicting things. And I think this is for two reasons. Number one, to try to confuse you, but number two, so that later they can claim, oh, that's not what I said, but that's another red flag. But like, for example, the day of the 2-week threat, right? The guy was saying, you know, maybe you can stay in 2 weeks, or maybe you have to leave maybe you have to leave in 2 weeks, but maybe you can stay. And this is dependent on if I buy the property or if the landlord sells it, or it was like a really hard to follow story, and you know, that somehow resulted in potentially I have to leave in 2 weeks, and also I'm taking this 4th room and not paying for it. But through it all, there was a strange, convoluted story, and somehow I was blamed for the situation, and like, it was all very hard to follow, aside from the fact that it was very disturbing for me, and I kind of knew at that point that I had to leave, you know. Another red flag, I feel like this might be the final one, but I guess this is gaslighting, and I don't know how my friend falls for this one. But like, when the guy gave us that crazy talk, he said, I'd like to use that room as my guest room. And actually, when I said I would leave, it was because he was already using it as a guest, or like he had a guest over and like wanted them to stay. And I'm like, hey, but we have an ad up for people to come look at the room. So like, what if, you know, they're going to say someone's living in there? What, you know what I mean? So yeah. I mean, that's pretty clear. I'd like to use the room as a guest room. That's pretty clear. But on the day that I left, my friend was saying through this guy, because to be honest, I didn't really want to talk to the guy because I'm too old to do all that yelling and stuff. But to be honest, I felt like if he said anything to me, I was gonna like yell and scream and whatever. Because he was totally ripping us off, and I just don't like being ripped off. Especially by a supposed friend, you know. But like, the guy was saying maybe you know, maybe I'll let you rent out the room. And maybe they can stay. Though I'm going to use the room as a guest room. And like he was giving the conflicting statements. And I think he was trying to claim that me and my friend somehow misunderstood him about him saying, when he said, I'd like to use the room as my guest room, that meant we cannot rent the room out anymore. But that's just not true, because this guy knows that I had an ad running and was actively talking to people, and I was telling them, you know, oh, such and such messaged me and said this and that, you know what I mean? And then after that talk, you know, now the ad was down, and I never mentioned anyone, you know, any new people coming in. And obviously if he had any intention of renting it, he'd say, hey, has anyone hit you up? Or now I know, though, he never had any intention of renting out the 4th room. That was like a ploy for him to just get me in the house, and he takes as much of the house as possible and pays as little as possible and tries to put as much of the cost on me and my friend as possible. And I think that I want to know something so sick about this. So for me, like, I'm not a rich person. I feel like you can tell just like by the fact that I ended up in such a situation that I'm not wealthy. I was almost a homeowner, but my dreams were taken from me when the economy went to you know what. Hashtag millennial problems. But, you know, I'm able to leave. I'm not going to stay anywhere that I'm not feeling it. You know what I mean? I'll pack my stuff up and leave. I'm a traveler. I've been traveling since I was 17. I've lived in 5 states. If I stay here, it's going to be number 6. Lived in 3 countries. So I just leave. But something I found out something I realized that's so sick. These abusive landlords can more easily overcharge a poor person than a rich person. So, like, basically with someone like me, I'm just not going to deal with that. I don't care if the house is by the beach and it's nice and beautiful. It's like, you have 2 rooms, you pay for the 2 rooms. If I'm expected to pay partially for a room that is yours, or rooms that are yours, or whatever, you know, there's an imbalance of who's of the rent or whatever, like, no, I'm leaving. But I have the means to do so. But, you know, I think that many people do not have the means. They get stuck in a living situation and they don't really have the means to just up and leave. Maybe they don't have the money for the security deposit. Maybe they don't have, maybe they have too much stuff to put in a car. Maybe they have, you know, they don't work online. Their work is not mobile or whatever, you know, whatever the reason may be. So they just stay and think, okay, well, I'm not, like, you know, the treatment in this situation is kind of bad. However, this is like better than me finding a new place, or me, like, even me, like, thinking before I came here, for example, like, oh, excuse me, and gosh, I wish I would have stayed in my studio. Oh, but whatever. Here I can have a nice big place for myself. So anyway, even when I was looking, I was thinking, oh, well, I live in this big beach house. Yeah, it's very there's a very toxic landlord situation going on. However, these other apartments I'm looking at are just real. Florida's rough right now, man. Florida is rough. Like, some of these apartments are just bad, like bad, and expensive. Like $1,200 for crappy little apartment. And it's like, well, then why would I leave my beautiful beach house even though I'm being overcharged? And of course, your own apartment is better than a room. But there's all these factors that lead people to stay in an abusive landlord situation. But I'm just like, I just refuse. And think about it. I was potentially doing an upcoming surgery, right? And now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, in Mississippi. But whatever. There's a doctor who does it in Mississippi here. Yeah, it's a little more country and everything, but anyway, I looked up the recovery for said surgery. The surgery is called a hip arthroscopy, and in Florida they do an advanced hip arthroscopy. I think here they do regular, but I don't really know. But I kind of just decided that was just too toxic for me to go back to, so, I feel like I'd be an idiot after everything I just told you. It's like, how could I go back? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So, but that's another thing. Like, anything like that can be exploited. Oh, you have health problems and you need some place to stay and you need this and that but I just was like, you know what? I just refuse to be abused, by anyone. So hopefully my story can help you avoid a bad housing situation in the future. Okay. And I hope you enjoyed one of my story times. I know I've kind of gone on 3 of these now, but to be honest, that whole situation was very traumatic for me, and I think only now am I able to fully articulate everything that occurred in such a small period of time that made me so uncomfortable that I just bounced. But hope you enjoyed the story time. Hopefully soon I can get back to doing better quality videos, but I'm kind of living out of my car. Not really, I'm, you know what I mean. But anyway, bye, sisters.